All right, so I've kind of finished both eyes. I know I can go back in there and do a little bit more work. I'm just going to brighten this up just a little bit. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some of the shading around the nose. One of the things, again, that I want to try to reiterate and keep reiterating is as you're shading, really try to use the pencil on its side. Try not to squeeze it terribly, and really try to make sure that your shading is very even. The more even you make it, the better it will ultimately look. And because we're just trying to blend this stuff together with just our fingertip, the smoother you put it down to begin with, the easier it will be to blend it. And you can see I was shading left to right, and I start trying to blend. When I blend up and down. And that way it kind of gets rid of some of the streakiness of the line. Now the first time I go over this, what I'm trying to do is really just get a little bit of a light gray everywhere. Certainly not as dark as it needs to be, but for me it's a lot easier to sort of build up to the shade that I need. And I think what I've told you through almost everything that we've done this year is you can always come back and make things darker. It is entirely much more complicated to come back in here and make things lighter, because that will require us to have to like erase and like redo. And instead of redoing this, my feeling is you can always just add more to it. Easy to add more to it, harder to sort of take away. Now what I'm doing is I'm looking for that little bit of shade and darkness that you see on the top side of the nostril. And there is no like hard line over here. There is a little bit of an edge, and it's created by like a value, medium value up against a light value. And I know I've drawn basically like a parenthesis over here for the edge of my nostril, because that is one of the stronger edges. But what makes that stand out is that part of the nose, if you look in the picture, that shadow to the left of that line is darker than the nose itself. And what that does, it creates something called an implied line. If you were talking about an English class, to imply something is to kind of like hint at something, to kind of say it without saying it. Well, an implied line is almost like creating a line without a line. It's really about finding an edge. And in this case, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find that edge by making this back little shadow that you see over here a little bit darker than my nostril. And no matter what your picture looks like, you're going to have some sort of change in value right by your nostrils. It'll either be lighter here and darker there, or vice versa. Most of your pictures are going to pretty much look like mine, where the nostril itself is a little bit light, and that little corner, that little sort of indent or crease, that ends up being a little bit darker. And by finding that and making that darker and making that a nice clean edge, you really make your nose pop up off your face. It makes it look three-dimensional. The inside of the nostril itself, little sort of nose holes, that's going to be one of the darkest spots you have. And it's not just only darker, but it's also one of your edges. So don't be afraid to go in there and make it dark. The only issue I have with some people sometimes is they not only do they just make it dark, it's the only thing they make dark, and they sort of ignore the rest of their face, and that would be a sort of mistake. We have a lot of really subtle light grays, and just like I did around the eyes, when I blend, you kind of want to blend like you're touching your face and touching your own nose, and her nose is kind of round, so I would be almost like I'm tracing my finger across her actual face and following that roundness and that contour of the face. And I don't expect you to get every single value, but you have to understand that in a drawing, what makes a drawing look really realistic is finding as much and as many different values as possible. The more shades of gray that you put on your picture, the more realistic that picture is going to look. Because our human eye is able to really see almost millions of subtle little variations in color and in shade and in lighting. And when you have a drawing that has a lot of variation, it makes our eye just think like, wow, that looks real. And for everybody you've ever seen do a drawing that looked photographic, just like it looks like just like a picture. Well, those things are all achieved generally by having a lot of shades of gray. Now, there's a little bit of a reflected spot over here on her nose, and I can't really get a white spot unless I make some of the area around that white spot a little bit darker. So you may notice that I've put a little bit of gray all over the place, and then I've come back with my eraser to sort of, erase in the highlight. The opposite side of the nose, the side that's on the sort of bright end where the light's coming from this side, really doesn't have a strong edge or a lot of light. But even with that, there still is a little bit more subtle gray right where her nose sort of pinches in. And it's important for me to look for those things and find those things, no matter how subtle they might be. That'll help me make something that looks like a nose. So if in your picture with the lighting, if it hits your one side of the face and really makes one side bright, really look for anything and everything that you can find as far as a slight change of gray. And remember, just like the other side, if you make the area behind or really kind of next to that nostril a little bit darker, it goes a long way in creating a sort of like effect that it's popping out. And again, there's really not a lot of work to do on the nose, but it is one of those things that is subtle. And when I mean subtle, I mean that it's like very light and delicate, and the changes from one color to the other is very, very light and gradual. And sometimes doing things that are subtle and sort of gradual like that, those things end up being the hardest things to do, because we, by inclination, we just want to come in there and make things super dark. So what I want to do is I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to do a little bit of the shading underneath the nose here on the side of the upper lip. I'm going to save the rest of that really for when we do the mouth. But since I'm in the area, and again, I want you to not necessarily work box by box. I just want you to work section by section. And since this is all really like one section, I'll kind of do a little bit of that right now. And you can see the way I'm shading. I mean, my photograph is not so dark anyway, but in the way that I'm working, I'm trying to work pretty light to begin with. And that's always, again, something that I will encourage all of you to do, is that work light at first. It will make the entire process a lot easier. And, again, for all the years I've been working, what I've always noticed in teaching how to do this is that it's always easier to add more shading to something than it is to come back and have to erase it and redo it. Again, side of the nose, I think you can see I've created this sort of hint of a nostril without some real big, terrible, dark outline. And I think that's the most important thing in your drawings, is look for opportunities not to outline stuff. We don't want it to look like a cartoon character. What we do want it to do is we want it to look like it is just shaded, just like light's falling across it. I'll just go one more step darker here. Okay. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that's that for the nose. Nothing too crazy. No dark outlines, especially along the bridge over here. Just going by what I see in the photograph as far as light and dark. Looking for the little bit of shade that you see right in the corner of the nostril. And usually the nostril in front is going to be a little bit lighter. The shadow on there is going to be a little bit darker. And that little difference is a huge one when you're trying to make the overall shading and shape of the nose. I'll leave you guys with that for today, and I'll come back tomorrow and we'll do the mouth, and we'll get closer to the finish line on this one.